Welcome to Political Pulse. My guest is former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs and Toby Senior Fellow at the Washington Institute, David Sheinker, with whom we'll discuss the latest local and regional developments. David Sheinker, welcome to Political Pulse. I'd like to start with questions related to the presidential election. How do you perceive the Doha meeting on Lebanon? Do you perceive it as a success or as a failure?
Well, good day to you. It's a pleasure to be with you. I think it's a little bit too early to say whether it's success or a failure. It's good that the parties are getting together, that the United States, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, that they're all sitting around, France, are sitting around and talking about this issue and have come to some sort of agreement in terms of the importance of getting a presidential candidate. Although I think that the priority is a little misplaced. Does it really matter ultimately if you have a president who is not committed to reforms, is weak, is not prepared to do what it takes to have accountability to get Lebanon out of this crisis? You may find yourself with a president and maybe even a new government and still in the same situation that you're in right now. So I think it's very soon to tell, but this is the early stages.
Do you mean Sulaiman Frangieh?
Sulaiman Frangieh or any of a number of people that are out there who I don't think would necessarily be committed to reform, would look to perhaps perpetuate the continued type of system that Lebanon is operating under. Once again, it's not about a president. It's about an individual with the personal fortitude to push forward, break some China, and get to the reforms necessary.
Would you say that the Army Commander-in-Chief, General Joseph Aoun, is a good contender?
Well, I said this months ago in, I believe, another interview. I thought that ultimately you'd end up with Joseph Aoun just because of a lack of ability to find consensus. And I have to say, I think Joseph Aoun would be perfectly acceptable, probably ultimately to all parties involved. And it remains to be seen, I think, once again, whether he would be able to carry out these type of reforms that are so necessary. He's going to need a lot of support. And I think that still a major element of Lebanese politics, i.e. Hezbollah and its partners, are committed to the current system that allows for corruption, mismanagement, and the total lack of accountability that landed you where you're at right now.
But it seems that the U.S. sanctions didn't deter Gebran Bassil. How can he be contained today?
Well, listen, there's a number of actors in Lebanon who are unproductive. Sanctions are not a silver bullet. They are an expression of U.S. disappointment or displeasure. They are certainly, I think, an onerous punishment. They are meant to affect a change in behavior, but they don't always do so. Sanctions aren't going to be enough, and certainly not unilateral sanctions. I think we have to be looking at multilateral sanctions, but obviously haven't gotten France on board, which I think in this case, in the case of Lebanon, is really the most important actor.
But there are a lot of Western countries that are looking into implementing sanctions or measures against those who are blocking the presidential elections. We saw that last week from a statement from the European Council. Do you think that these measures are serious? Are they really looking into this?
Well, I hope so. I mean, we heard from the French right after the port explosion that they would be looking to sanction individuals in Lebanon, and they never occurred. I think France is really reticent to proceed with sanctions. They have not really, I think, focused on issues of accountability and
Why
rule
is
of
that?
law in Lebanon. Well, the cynical part of me says that they're interested in doing business in Lebanon, that they believe that accountability would somehow undermine stability. I think this is entirely the wrong formula once again, and something that over time has landed Lebanon in the situation that it currently is in, which is basically all crime and no punishment.
So would you say that the French approach right now is not the right approach?
Well, listen, I think that working more closely with the quintet, I think, is a positive. I think expressing what appears to be a more serious willingness to proceed with sticks as well as with carrots, I think is helpful. But this is a recent change.
But is the U.S. aligned with the French approach? Or not approach?
It appears, well, it appears that there's some bit of consensus on this based on the reporting coming out of Doha. Once again, how much stock we can put into, even if, as I said earlier, even if you get a president, does this mean you're on your way to extricating Lebanon from the crisis? And I don't think the two things are the same. Should we only be focused on a president, or should we be focused on rule of law? Should Lebanon, for example, be pressed by France, Germany, even Japan and others to render Riyad Salama? He stands accused of some financial crimes, I think $300 million. He deserves his day in court, certainly in Europe and elsewhere. But I think it's important that Riyad Salama should be able to speak his mind, to tell an international community, if he can't do so in Lebanon, to say how Lebanon ended up in this crisis, who, in addition to himself, might be responsible for some of the policies and the corruption that landed Lebanon where it is. And so I think, that type of avenue might be more effective at getting Lebanon where it needs to go than necessarily picking one more individual for 6 years who may not be able to do anything.
But would you say that this individual needs to be a sovereignist?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful for Lebanon. I myself have some issues with the fact that it's always the international community. It's always that Lebanon is looking to Iran or the West somehow to help get them out of these difficulties, that they can't somehow manage to solve these problems themselves. I think ultimately Lebanon is going to have to solve these themselves. But the main thing is that Lebanon should be ultimately a sovereign country that is not occupied by other countries or dictated what their policy should be, that the state should have a monopoly on the use of force, but we're obviously a very long way from that point.
So Jean-Yves Le Drian's mission in Lebanon is moot?
It's not moot. Listen, I like to see some attention being paid to Lebanon. I think that both for Washington, there was some intense focus on the maritime agreement with Israel, but I don't think Lebanon has been a priority, and it's hard to say really, given that all that's going on in the world, right? The coup in Niger, the civil war in Sudan that's having spillover, all these other countries at risk in the Sahel or south of the Sahel of instability, the Nile River at risk, the Red Sea, Ukraine, Russia, China, all these issues, whether Lebanon should be a priority. But I think certainly for stability in the Middle East, it's important. And but countries, I think, by definition, have a limited bandwidth. It's good to see, I think, some attention being paid to Lebanon right now. I wish there was more of a sense of priority among the Lebanese for solving this than just France and the international community.
Since you mentioned the maritime border deal, do you think that it will still stand if a war suddenly breaks out?
Well, I said this, at the time of the deal. I think that if there is war, that Hezbollah will not feel itself bound to not target, Israeli installations in the Med, Chevron, Karish. I think that these installations could be in play. That they will not be immune from the conflict. I have a hard time seeing that. On the other hand, for Israel, I can't imagine Israel going after a Total facility. So, in a sense, Lebanon may be immune.
But Hezbollah is still the master of the political scene, unfortunately. How can we overcome or move on from this vicious cycle it created?
Well, it's hard to get out of when you have, one militia in Lebanon that obviously kept its weapons in contravention of the Taif Accords, and now dominates the country, intimidates its political adversaries, kills its political adversaries without compunction. Obviously, this is being underwritten, supported by both Iran and Syria. It's going to be hard to change that with this regime in Tehran that is, I think, so committed to undermining regional stability and planting and supporting all these militia throughout the region. Unfortunately, ultimately, the Hezbollah's power in Lebanon is linked to its relationship with Iran, and Hezbollah shows no signs of changing its behavior or approach to Lebanon and its domination of your country. That's the sad nature of the problem. What's more is that I think they are somehow profiting off the near financial collapse of Lebanon, the dollarization of the society, the devaluation of the lira, the establishment of their own Cardinal Hassan banking system. So they're very comfortable with the situation as is, and has never been an organization in any event that embraced reform. So I think that we're in a holding pattern here with Hezbollah.
But don't you think that the Iranian and Saudi rapprochement will help in reducing the overall influence of Hezbollah in Lebanon?
No, I don't.
At all?
I don't think Iran is going to give up on Hezbollah, just like they're not going to give up on the Hashd-e-Shaabi, on their total support for the Assad regime, or even the Houthis. I mean, we heard from Tim Lenderkin, the U.S. envoy to Yemen, pretty recently that the Iranians are continuing to arm the Houthis. Now, they may ultimately agree to some sort of prolonged Hudna ceasefire with Saudi Arabia. They will remain an Iranian-backed militia, just like Hezbollah will remain an Iranian-backed militia that dominates Lebanon. Whether Iran decides to constrain Hezbollah temporarily, that may occur. I wouldn't bet on it, but that may occur. But we see that even with this rapprochement, we see roadside bomb being planted by Hezbollah in Megiddo, these tents that are being set up over the border, a number of provocations against Israel. They're not stopping. I think they regrettably, I think, see right now what's going on in Israel as a point of weakness of Israel, and are expanding their provocations, which is very dangerous.
Well, you're depicting a very sad picture. This is my last question for you. Lebanon is in
Sure.
Lebanon is in caretaker republic mode. We do not have a president. Our government is expediting current affairs. The central bank governor's term is coming to an end, as will General Joseph Aoun's term at the end of this year. And key nominations are still at a standstill. Yet the political class seems unbothered by these events. How will Lebanon overcome these vacancies and challenges?
Well, I said it earlier, there's no sense of urgency among Lebanon's elites, no sense of urgency at the vacuum that exists in the government, in the presidential palace, no sense of urgency at the suffering of the Lebanese people, the devaluation of the lira by 98, 99%, no sense of urgency about 75% of Lebanese falling under the poverty line. No sense of urgency to hold people account for the port explosion that killed, several hundred, wounded several thousand, and made 300,000 people homeless. This is an elite that just has very little regard for the well-being of the Lebanese people. I hope that the concerted diplomatic endeavors, in Doha and elsewhere, will help push Lebanon in a certain direction. I hope that there is a move toward consensus on the need to embrace some sort of reform. But the international community, sanctions aren't going to do this. Nobody's going to send in the troops. So this is going to have to be, at the end of the day, a Lebanese decision, the decision of the elites and the people to try and move forward. I think Lebanon is capable of it. I think a lot of people in Lebanon are sick and tired of the way that their elites, their representatives are behaving. That this can't be business as usual anymore. But I don't know what's going to sway this group of people to, I think, start to care about the Lebanese people. I hope that some movement, some international consensus can help encourage some movement, but I'm not optimistic. Sooner or later, it will get a president. I hope it's a good one, but I hope that it actually makes a difference because of the direction we're going, the type of stagnation, sclerosis in your political system. It's hard to see Lebanon embrace these reforms and actually be able to implement them.
Thank you so much, David Sheinker, for being my guest.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. And thank you all for watching. You can replay this interview on This is Beirut's website and social media platforms. See you next time.